Squad announcements is like opening that first door in the advent calendar. Excitement is building. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. So since I decided I was going to make this video about 20 minutes ago, in my head I've just been going Jamison Gibson Park, Jamison Gibson Park, Jamison Gibson Park, because I know I'm going to forget somebody that isn't included in the squad. I didn't want it to be him. So I'm still gonna forget somebody obvious, but we'll talk about those a bit later. But hopefully I've said his name already, so you can't catch me out on that one. But yeah, we're gonna have a quick look at the squad. This is just, squad has pretty much just come out today, so it's not going to be in depth. We're going to talk about, first of all, who's in the squad. Then we're going to talk about who's not in the squad. And I'm definitely going to forget people there because I'm just going to go kind of very high level, of the ones that, are most obvious off the top of my head. So I'm definitely going to forget people there. Please post people that you think probably should have been included in the squad, at least considered for the squad. Or people that you think have been excluded correctly as well. I forget some, because there were a couple in my mind that I may forget later on. And then after that, then we're going to talk about kind of positionally, how the squad is looking, and just very brief on each of the players. I keep saying brief, but this video is probably going to be honestly 30 to 50 minutes long, somewhere in that region, I would imagine. But as I say, the reason I'm calling it brief is because the amount of detail that I'm going to go into is not that much. And, maybe I'll make another video at some point. I'm thinking maybe over the weekend, because I'm probably going to have 4 days off coming up at the weekend, like Saturday to Tuesday or whatever. So I might have time then to maybe go into a little bit more depth. We'll have to see on that though. Sometimes I want to make a million videos, but with work and, having to do other things on my time off as well, it means that, what I want to do is not what I actually can do. So I'll try my best though to try and get something out for you guys. It might end up though that other squads are coming out and I want to talk about those as well. So anyway, enough of the jabbering. Let's just get into the squad first, and then we'll talk about again who's not in it and who is in it. So let me open up my thing here. You think I'd be professional and have all this ready, right? I did have it ready a second ago, and then I said, oh no, I'll put it over here and I'll definitely have it when I need it, which obviously isn't true. Okay, so here we have it opened up here. Okay, so the squad, start with the forwards. So forwards are Ryan Baird, Finlay Bealham, Tyke Byrne, Caelan Doris, Tyke Furlong, Keane Healy, Rob Herring, Cormac Izuchuku, Ollie Yeager, Ronan Kelleher, Joe McCarthy, Peter O'Mahony is the captain, Tom O'Toole, Andrew Porter, Keane Prendergast, James Ryan, Dan Sheehan, Nick Timoney and Josh van der Fleer. Then in the backs we have Bundy Aki, Caelan Blade, Craig Casey, Jack Crowley, Kieran Frawley, Robbie Henshaw, Jordan Larmour, James Lowe, Stuart McCluskey, Conor Murray, Calvin Nash, Jimmy O'Brien, Jamie Osborne, Sam Prendergast, Gary Ringrose and Jacob Stockdale. So before I forget to mention it, 3 uncapped players in it, because I know this is one that I wouldn't mention because we just get kind of swept up with things, right? So Cormac Izuchuku from Ulster, Jamie Osborne and Sam Prendergast, both from Leinster, in there as the 3 uncapped players included in there. So it's a nice squad, but initial reaction is that it's going to be a tough series. Going into South Africa, their own backyard. Yes, the Springboks have injury woes, but the Springboks have unbelievable depth. And whatever team they put out, it's going to be tough for Ireland. So Ireland, these players, whoever makes the test team out of this, these guys, they're going to have to bring their absolute best, their A game, and it still might not be good enough. That's my first reaction, to the squad, is that these are amazing players, but they're going against the world champions and a team that are always tough to beat. and again, I think maybe it's not going to be good. They're not going to be good enough, but hopefully it's going to be epic. Hopefully it's going to be a fantastic, test series. Both teams smashing into each other. Lots of skills on show as well, and just something for rugby fans to enjoy. If it gives us that, then and if Ireland lose both tests, then I'm fine with that. I'm not someone who, obviously I want my team to win every test, but not someone whose enjoyment is solely connected to whether my team wins or not. I enjoy rugby, and sometimes that means that your team gets beaten up or gets outthought or outfought or whatever, rung rings around, wherever it is. But you can still, at least for me, appreciate the skill and the effort, etc. that was in that, and just the epicness of the occasion as well. So, and again, I think this is going to be an epic test series, right? So let's talk about who's not in the squad. So the first one, because I said his name a million times now, Jamison Gibson-Park. It's a huge loss for Ireland. We don't have a 9 anywhere near his level, available. So, he's, I'm not going to say he's irreplaceable, but no, I don't think any of our 9s are going to perform to the level that he would have in South Africa. So yeah, he's a massive loss for the team. Other notable exclusions, one that comes straight to mind is Gavin Coombs. I don't like, it's one of these ones where you wonder, is he ever gonna kind of fit in whatever, I don't know what it is, and until maybe at some stage, maybe Andy Farrell writes a book or something and says something about it. I don't think anybody will. I'm sure you'll hear rumors flying around or whatever, but rumors are rumors for a reason, right? But I think he can count himself unlucky not to get in. But then, when you're thinking about that, then you think about it, well, if he was in and then the person who he's replaced, then we'd be talking about them being, and it'd probably be like someone like Keane Prendergast, right, would probably be the one who would be excluded. And you think, well, he's a bit unlucky not to get in either. And that's kind of, I think that's kind of the way it is, really, is that someone is gonna miss out. Also, we got there's no Jack Conan. I'm pretty sure, I'm just scanning the thing, pretty sure there's no Jack Conan in there either. So he's another big loss for Ireland, not having him available in there, because he gives us, I think he just gives us that kind of hybrid, between linking backs and forwards, the skills of a back, but also the power of a forward as well. That I don't think any of the others bring it to the same level. Would be what I'd say about that. Then other guys, Jeremy Lockman, not in there either. May have thought he might have gotten a go. In that, we'll talk about that. Well, we'll talk around it. I'm not going to say about it. We'll talk around it maybe a bit later when we just go through the squad by position. Then, so who else? And very light on second rows. That's going to be interesting. I'm just looking at, there's a breakdown here per position, and we've only basically got 3 specialist second rows going, and I'm thinking somebody's jumping on a plane in between those 2 tests, to get out there. I know that you can bring somebody like Baird or whatever into the second row, but I think, we might, if we have injuries in the first one in that position, you might see somebody having to jump on a plane to get out there. Then scrum half, no, obviously John Cooney, the boat has sailed for him, but I would have thought with no James Gibson-Park that he should be in the top 3 scrum halves. If not him, then Doak. One of those two, I feel on merit should be in the squad. But then again, it's like, well, then who do you exclude from the squad if they're coming in? And that's where I have a little bit difficulty, because then you exclude somebody like, if you exclude, let's say, Conor Murray, and you say, okay, well, Conor, thanks for all your service, but it's time to maybe, try and look a bit more to the future. That's a possibility, but no, it's obviously not what they went with. Then we've also got the two Byrne brothers, Ross Byrne and Harry Byrne, both excluded, and I think everybody kind of saw that coming. I think Harry Byrne this season absolutely played himself out of any kind of contention, for Leinster and ultimately for Ireland as well. I think Ross Byrne, he didn't play in the Six Nations, and then he didn't have his best season for Leinster either. It was much better last year, and he got rewarded for that, with Ireland selection. But this season, I didn't feel that I didn't feel like he merited starting as many top games for Leinster as he did either. But I didn't feel like he merited, being number two to Jack Crowley on his performance this season. So we'll have to kind of watch the space on that, whether that's kind of, it's going to be one of these ones where he's now kind of joins the group, including the likes of Jack Carty, etc., who will be players who will be running around at URC level, but maybe, they're no longer in the thoughts of the Ireland selectors. It's probably it certainly is too early to make a determination on that, but it's kind of watch the space on it. Then I'm just thinking like other guys who, like, there are other players who've been excluded, but the names just aren't coming into my head. So if you have people, well, somebody that I'm actually thinking of now is what's his name? Tom Stewart, right, from Ulster. But you look at the guys that are in there and you think, well, again, it's a case of who you're excluding to bring him, and it's one of those ones with the size of squads. Especially when it's only 2 games. I think it was 3 games you would see those types of players being selected in a larger squad. And then, I'm kind of thinking, well, would you want them down there just for the experience of being down there and having them with those coaches, etc. But again, you just have to kind of bow to the greater experience of the guys who are paid to pick the squad. So there's definitely lots of players that are missed in terms of, I'm just coming to mind, like obviously Mac Hansen is out as well with injury, and we always seem kind of light when he's not available as well. We do have some really good players to come in on the wings, but it's just good to have him in there because, again, it's one of those ones in terms of driving standards, I think. But any other players that I missed that you think should have been either in the squad or certainly you think are maybe unlucky to miss out, post them down in the comments, and we can maybe, if I do come back and do a bit more of an in-depth look, then we can talk about those players a little bit more. Any ones that have been suggested, we can have a look at where they kind of sit, maybe in a pecking order, that kind of thing. But now let's go through the squad in terms of the different positions. So we are going to start with obviously loose head prop. So let me pull that up now. So loose head props, we've got Andrew Porter, Cian Healy and Tom O'Toole. So Andrew Porter, still don't think we've seen the best of him in the last couple of seasons, honestly. Last year, he felt like he was way off the pace for me, and he had a lot of trouble in terms of his scrummaging. This year, he's had games where he's been good, and you kind of seen glimpses of what he was maybe 2 seasons ago, but still not up to that level, I don't feel, and still struggles in the scrum as well. We saw it at the weekend, against what is a decent Bulls front row. So, and if a decent front row get on top of you, then you are going to struggle. But one thing about Porter is that it's not just that he struggles in the scrum; he struggles to change the picture, to turn things around on the field. And for me, then, when we look at Cian Healy and Tom O'Toole being in the squad, like we saw Andrew Porter playing almost like the entire game, recently for Leinster, and then Cian Healy being left on the bench. So if that's the case for Leinster, then you worry about it for Ireland as well. And then Tom O'Toole is someone I have a lot of time for. The guy, he was he was very prominent in Six Nations 2 seasons ago, or 2 years ago, should I say, where he, made huge meters in his carries and stuff like that, and was really dynamic in the loose. And I hope that he's considered to be the backup to Porter, and Cian Healy is kind of the extra guy, because Cian Healy, I think, he's a fantastic player. He's been one of my favourite players all through, the period that he's played for Ireland and Leinster. So it's not anything kind of, against Cian himself. It's just that it's what I call the Fergus McFadden rule, and you probably you know who it's about. So back when Fergus McFadden played for Leinster and for Ireland, it's not like a rule that I wrote down anywhere. It's just a rule in my own head, where if I was judging the quality of the Ireland squad and the Ireland backs especially, and the starting team, would be, the judgment would be, is Fergus McFadden starting? Then I would think that would kind of set it at a certain level. And then the way the rule worked was that if Ireland's backs were improving, it would mean that somebody would come along who would say, listen, pick me, and they would be good enough and get picked ahead of Fergus McFadden, and he would drop down to the bench. And then you would feel, okay, well, there's progress being made in terms of the development of the backs. And then the next stage would be if somebody else came along and then bumped him off the bench, and then eventually bump him out of the squad, would be the thing. So again, it's not against the player themselves. It's just like certain players at certain points in their career, they feel like that they set the bar in terms of, this is where this is where kind of I'm not going to say the minimum. It's it's obviously above the minimum, but there's a bar here, and this player, his level, that's where he is, right? And he's at the stage in his career now where he's not going to get massively better, and he obviously with time he is going to deteriorate, but he's not suddenly going to get massively worse either. So you got someone who is very pretty much consistent in terms of the level that you expect them to be at, in terms of how they're training, how they're playing, etc. And then the idea is, if that area of your team is improving, then someone comes along who is better than them and pushes them down the pecking order. And the aim obviously is that if your team is on the up, that you have multiple players leapfrogging that player and pushing them down. So that's where my Fergus McFadden rule came from. But Cian Healy is one of those guys, I think, in the front row who's kind of at that level for me, that again, it's not anything against Cian himself. I was absolutely delighted, because I thought that when he got injured before the World Cup, that was it. Like, Cian Healy, he's finished now with Ireland. He's probably finished with Leinster again as well. We're not going to see him on a rugby field again. And that was a very sad thing to think about at the time. So I was delighted when he was able to come back and represent Ireland and Leinster as well. But for me, in terms of the front row, he's that level at the moment now where we need to see younger players coming through who can exceed his current level and push him out of the squads. And we're not seeing that at the minute. And So that's why I'd like to see Tom O'Toole stepping up and at least being able to challenge Cian Healy for a spot in the 23. At least that would show, okay, well, maybe Tom is making progress. But I think the long-term goal would be to try and get, more loose heads that are coming through that can kind of push Cian Healy to the point where maybe maybe he doesn't get to pick when his last Ireland game is going to be. Maybe that gets picked for him. And I know it's kind of a sad thing at times, but still, that's just kind of the barometer that I use with stuff like that. So, as I said, Porter, still don't think he's anywhere near his best. Cian Healy, super versatile. You can see why he's in there. He can play hooker. He can play all across the front row. But I'd love to see Tom O'Toole getting more game time. I think he's probably, of the three of those, currently the most dynamic. Andrew Porter, we have not seen anywhere near enough of him in the loose in the last couple of seasons, and he used to be such a threat at the breakdown, and he used to be involved in the loose as well. So want to see more of that from him. And the reason why I want the likes of Tom O'Toole, etc., being involved is because they can push someone like Andrew Porter and say, listen, like, now I've got the bench spot. I'm not done now. I'm coming for your number one shirt. And if you don't perform, I'm ready to go. And I think we've lacked kind of some fresh blood in the squad, or in the matchday squads even, that can do that, to can put pressure on the starters and say, listen, if you don't deliver anywhere near your best, then I'm going to give Andy Farrell an option that he can say, okay, well, let's sit Andrew out or put him on the bench for the next one because Tom is ready to go. So hopefully I explained that. I think I did. Now, on to hookers. So we've got Dan Sheehan, one of Ireland's best players overall, certainly one of the best forwards, and just gives you more than just a hooker. But having said that, I want to see him doing more of a hooker's role. It's brilliant seeing him like massive pace around the, in the loose, great link play and great awareness, etc. But I want to see more of the bread and butter. I want to see, straighter line out throws, the right height, etc. Good communication with his jumpers and the lifters, etc. Making sure everything, goes off smoothly. Better scrummaging as well. And, just doing the job of a hooker and bringing his extra stuff as well. So I think that's a challenge for him is can he improve, the things that maybe aren't the best parts of his game. Ronan Kelleher, always kind of the backup to Sheehan. Sometimes I'd like, when these two kind of came around, like Keller obviously came first and he got injured, and then Sheehan came along, but then there was that period where nobody was sure which was the better of the two, until Dan Sheehan just said, well, obviously I am. But there was that period where like one would start and the other would be on the bench, and they kind of flip it around, and we don't see that as much anymore. And I'd like to see that. I'd like to see Kelleher getting starts, because for a couple of reasons. I think Kelleher, in terms of just doing the hooker role, is a more solid player than Sheehan is. And also I think that we miss at times Dan Sheehan's impact from the bench, because if he comes on when the game is broken up, what he can do in the loose just becomes even better, whereas now what we're doing is he's getting brought off at a time when maybe he would have his biggest impact on the game. So, for me, I'd love to see those two switched around. But then we've also got Rob Herring, who, in terms of just a pure hooker, is probably the best of the three players. His line out throwing is generally the more accurate. Yes, he can have trouble in the line out, but I think any hooker can have bad days at the office as well, but generally his is better. I think his scrummaging is better as well. And then things like, in the tight as well. Probably in the loose, doesn't offer as much as the other two, and that's probably why we're going to see him as a backup here. I think, the way Ireland play, what the players do in the loose is maybe certainly for Hooker is given more weighting than what they do in the core role, as it were. But still some decent options there. Then on to tight head prop. Got Tyke Furlong, who kind of like Porter last year wasn't brilliant. He had some time off around when his father sadly passed away and came back and seemed to have new impetus there, but still not near his best. We're seeing glimpses. I think we're seeing more glimpses from him than we are from Porter. But then we have Finlay Bealham as well. And for me, this is another one where I'd like to see Bealham getting starts ahead of Furlong, because for me, when we come out of the World Cup and we went into the Six Nations, for me, Bealham was, in terms of just pure performance, was ahead of Furlong. But then once Furlong was ready, he went straight back in as a starter. So I'd like to see Bealham maybe getting starts and then Furlong having to come off the bench and maybe fight for his position a little bit more. I don't like where there's just a rigid, pecking order where it's just, this guy's available, he's first, this guy's second, this guy's third, and we never, you never mix it up, and it doesn't matter in terms of form. It's just, we look at the ceiling of the player and we go, Tyke Furlong obviously has the higher ceiling, so therefore he gets to start all the time. So I would like to see Finlay Bealham maybe get a start and just see how he goes and see how Furlong does coming off the bench. Ollie Yeager, I think, has had a fantastic season. It's great to see him being included in there, and I want to see him in the mix as well. Again, I don't want to see it being a case of it's Furlong first, Bealham is on the bench, and Yeager is just there in case somebody gets injured and then he comes into the squad. I want players to go there, without a test team having been picked. Or without test 23 haven't been picked, like in pencil or wherever. I want players to genuinely be able to go there, and the way they train and the way they're taking instruction, etc., for the coaches then to say, well, actually, no, maybe Ollie is the guy that we want to give a try here, whether it's on the bench or starting, wherever. But that's what I'd like to see. Obviously, players have credit in the bank, but I think there always comes a time in the life of a squad or the life of a coach, a head coach, where credit in the bank for players at the start, I think, is brilliant, and in the middle as well. But then towards the end, then it becomes almost a millstone around their neck, where they know things have to change, but they can't change them because they're going to be loyal to the players who have the credit in the bank, and therefore that eventually leads to their downfall. But I don't think Andy Farrell is anywhere near that yet, especially when you think he's going to take a year off as well to go do the lines and then come back. But on to second row then, only three guys in here who are specialists. So Tyke Byrne, he's back to his poaching best. What he needs though, and again, it's why I talked about the likes of, wanting to see more from the likes of Porter, is he needs other people to be a threat for Ireland at the breakdown. Because in that quarterfinal against New Zealand, if you watch it again, right, I don't know why, but if anybody would watch it again from an Irish point of view, but if you watch it again and just keep an eye on when Byrne is looking to go into a ruck, you'll see that there's an all-back player who's actually marking him. And somebody mentioned that it's actually a Joe Schmidt tactic, actually from back when he was at Leinster. There's an all-black player basically marking him, and their job is to just make sure that he can't go in and compete for the ball. And he did it really well. And that's the problem. It doesn't matter how good he is at competing for the ball, if the opposition decided to just kind of, man mark him out of that part of his game. So that's why I feel like we need other players to be a threat at the breakdown and, potentially spread the workload around. But he's still a fantastic player. Joe McCarthy, in terms of like the last two seasons, for me, definitely in terms of a player who's emerged and the best of the crop that have come through, and brings that extra kind of just physicality there, and especially when you've got like the likes of actually another player who's not included, Ian Henderson. But when you got the likes of Ian Henderson, who has kind of been, I wouldn't say on the way out, because that's kind of disrespectful to him, but he's had injury problems, and he's kind of been in and out of squads, and hasn't had that kind of consistent time the way he used to do. And so having Joe McCarthy in there as a young player, I think is brilliant. You got James Ryan there, another guy, he's coming back from an injury himself, a long layoff. So it's going to be interesting to see how he goes in terms of whether he's going to be on the bench, or I think if it's not going to be Byrne at 6, then he probably is going to be on the bench. If it's Byrne at 6, then he's going to be starting. But with the dearth of locks that they have, he knows he's going to be in the matchday squad either way. But injury, and then I felt like there was a weird kind of start to the season as well, with the kind of captaincy, that co-captaincy at Leinster, which I don't know why they did it, but it kind of diminished his influence. I felt. I think James Ryan is one of those guys that you just say to him, listen, you go out and you do your job, because he does a lot of one-scene work. And I don't know whether he's the guy then that you want to be, up there talking to the referee necessarily. I certainly out of this squad would prefer Peter O'Mahony. But onto the back row, where we do have Peter O'Mahony in there, and he's another one where I think, like, if you talk about like someone like McFadden or Healy, kind of setting that kind of lower level. I'm not saying the bottom level, but the lower level. O'Mahony is one of those that kind of sets it at the top level, where if we can get someone who is keeping Peter O'Mahony out of the team, well, then we know we've discovered the next new big thing for Ireland, which hasn't come along in a few seasons yet. Like, obviously Joe McCarthy is the guy that's come through, but in the back row we've lots of talent running around, but nobody is really come along. It's the way that the likes of Doris and Van der Fleer did, and then O'Mahony as well, like all those years ago, to come in and say, listen, look at me, I'm going to win 100 caps, and I'm going to be captain someday. We'd need someone at that level, I think, to push Peter O'Mahony out of the starting team, in terms of if he's fit and available, and he's another one that it kind of uses as a barometer for really super top class players that are coming through. So we've got Peter O'Mahony as captain there. Again, a guy who's bit in and out over the season because of injury. Then we've got Caelan Doris, and the thing with this as well is that, like, Doris, I much prefer Doris at 6, but if Peter O'Mahony is available, I want that guy on the field, because he for me, looking at the entire squad, he's head and shoulders above the others in terms of captaincy, and the threat he brings in the line-out, and just, we talked about before, that absolute dog as well that he has in him, and then just his willingness to do things that he shouldn't be able to do, and like defy gravity and gets it to a ball somehow against the All Blacks that time. Those kind of things, that he just brings special moments. So if he's available, I want him in there, and if that means Doris has to play 8, Doris has to play 8. There's no argument about it. But I think in the future, maybe Doris at 6, Van der Fleer or maybe somebody else at 7, and then we need then to have someone who is going to step up at 8 then, I think, from there. But for now, Doris at 8 is decent enough, I think. Van der Fleer, he's another one who kind of had a World Cup hangover, whatever you want to call it, and we didn't see the best of him through the World Cup really, and afterwards either. And he's kind of the one that's missed out a bit more, because he's the one that's been, on the bench for Leinster, etc. So I think he's the one that's maybe going to respond better to that. Then we have Ryan Baird, who we're seeing more of the kind of the bread and butter of a back row from him, rather than all the fancy stuff. He still has the fancy stuff going, but I think he's improving as a player as well. So he's always a decent option, but he's the kind of player, again, I'd like to, if he's included, I'd like to see him on the bench, because I think impact off the bench, he that's where for me he's better. Then we have Nick Timoney, who's had a fantastic season, and he's one in there himself, and actually Keane Prendergast, two guys there that if you're looking for threats at the breakdown, those two boys can certainly deliver for you. Also, a good carrier of the ball too, and a good option there as well. And kind of players that when you think, okay, they're being included, but let's see them actually getting some game time, and not just because somebody got injured. And that's really what I want to see. I don't want to see this rigid thing of, well, the starting back row is obviously O'Mahony, Van der Fleur and Doris, and you put Ryan Baird on the bench, and then the other guys wait until somebody pulls a hamstring or does whatever, dislocates a shoulder, and then they get a go. So again, I want to see it that if they're showing good things to the coaches, the coaches are willing to actually give them a go. So yeah, those two boys, Timoney and Prendergast, very happy there and there. Then Cormac Izuchukwu, guy's been a sensation for Ulster. I think being there with Richie Murphy in charge now as well is really going to help him in terms of development. It's great that he's on this tour. He may be one of those guys that's on the tour just to train with the senior squad, and for them to have a look at him. And I think maybe Sam Prendergast, possibly the same, in the same kind of vein, have a look at him, and not necessarily with the idea that he's going to play, but just have him in the environment and see how he copes with the environment. They did that with Prendergast previously, actually, and that's what they might be doing for him. But again, if he goes down there and he's tearing up trees, and they decide, well, this guy can actually do a job for us, then give him a go. Stick him out. Why not? Okay, on to scrum halves then. We got Conor Murray. Talked about him before that. Listen, he's amazing servant for Ireland, but it kind of speaks to the depth that we have at 9, that he's still in the squad. He's another one of those that kind of sets that bar that somebody has to come along to knock him off, for us to say, well, okay, our 9 stocks are beginning to improve now because some young guy has come along and knocked Conor Murray out of the squad. At the moment, it's not happening. He's, and again, I talked about it previously, that Conor Murray in the last year really has worked very hard in terms of, getting himself back into good form, but also he's changing his game slightly, because last season I felt like he was very ponderous, and his play he would be a detriment to our attack, because the ball was just so slow and decision making was slow as well. And then he maybe a bit of an over reliance on, I'm just going to box kick and not look at any other option, that kind of thing. But in the last year, he's had a bit of a resurgence, a bit of a renaissance for him. So I'm happy for him to be included, on those grounds, that we're not, he's not the Conor Murray that was, I felt last year was in decline. Now he's had that little bump back up, and I think he's definitely there on merit. Craig Casey, I think it makes sense. Jack Crowley is going to be the starting 9. Put Casey beside him. The two know each other very well. Craig, not up to the level of James Gibson-Park, but we don't have a 9 that is. But he brings his own strengths as well, and I hope that the way he's allowed to bring those to us, I hope they're not just going in there and say, well, I know you're not James Gibson Park, but this is what he does, and this is what you have to do. There's certain things, obviously, that they want. They want quick ball. They want them to be, there and available, and quick thinking, etc. But the things that Casey is good at, let him bring those in there as well, and kind of mix things up and keep the opposition guessing. Because if he's playing his natural game rather than trying to be Jameson Gibson Park, then there isn't going to be that kind of hesitation in terms of, it's all going to be kind of instinct for him, and that's really what you want. You want to make it comfortable for him, because I think he probably is going to be the starting 9. Caelan Blade, another guy who's had a great season, and it's great to see him being rewarded. And again, I want to see him in the mix. I want to see him to be a genuine option in terms of matchday squads as well. Onto your halves then. Jack Crowley, obviously the number one choice, and the last year has, the gap between him and those, that were challenging him for that 10 jersey has grown immensely. You think about it like that, last year, Crowley definitely emerged as number one, but he had a fight with Ross Byrne to do that. Ross Byrne has gone backwards in that last year. Harry Byrne, for me, he's never been fit enough for long enough for me to say that he's a genuine option long term for Ireland or for Leinster. So as a Leinster fan, I'm not too unhappy with their exclusion. Obviously, on a personal level, you obviously feel bad for players who are excluded, but we're just talking rugby here. Kieran Frawley then, he's definitely on a 23 in his back, unless Josh van der Fleer has it, and then he'll have 22 in his back. But he's going to be 22 or 23 probably for both of the tests, you would imagine, barring injury. And given that, it means that potentially if Ireland go for let's say they want to go for a 6-2 split, it probably means that Sam Prendergast, who's there as well, maybe doesn't see game time unless there's injuries. But the guy's good enough to be a starter for Ireland, or to be coming off the bench or wherever. And if he goes on and he makes a mess of things, or wherever he makes a mistake, I think this is the kind of thing where it's going to help him anyway in his career, that he seems that, similar to Jack Crowley, he has that temperament, or seems to at least, because he was there last year down in South Africa when Leinster pulled off that win against the Sharks, and then got absolutely destroyed by the Bulls. When the likes of Harry Byrne and Ross Byrne were back in Dublin, like Ross was preparing for Champions Cup final, I think, and then Harry was preparing for the Champions, or the URC, semi-final against Munster. So he's experienced that before, and I think he has that temperament to be able to take the knocks and to become a better player because of it. So I don't see a downside of finding a way to give him game time. I think it would be brilliant. On to centres then. We're stacked in the centres. It's kind of weird. Like we've got Bundy Aki, who the last year has been Ireland's best player, without doubt. Like, the guy won so many player of the match awards. It can't be close to anyone else. He's just been absolutely outstanding, fantastic. Robbie Henshaw, he's done well, kind of filling in, as it were. He obviously puts his hand up to be a starter, but he was used to kind of starting at 12. Obviously, he used to play 13, moved to 12, and now he's been playing 13, and then he switched back to 12 because Ringrose come back in, etc. So he's moved around a little bit this year, and because of that, maybe he's going to miss out. I think it depends on Gary Ringrose's fitness. I think, because it seems like the starting is either going to be Aki and Henshaw or Aki and Ringrose. Then Gary Ringrose has said only just recently back from injury. It seems like we've had at least a month, if not more. It must be more than a month of reports saying Gary Ringrose should be fit and available for this weekend. He's not. Then the next week, Gary Ringrose should be fit and available in the mix for next weekend. He's not. On to the next one, on to the next one. And finally, he was available for that semi-final defeat against the Bulls. So it'll be interesting to see in terms of the Irish camp, where he is and whether they consider that it's going to be him starting over Henshaw or not. Then we've got Stuart McCluskey, a guy who, anytime he's playing for Ireland, I think he's done really well. He's delivered, and he gives you that meters after contact, that offloading ability as well, and that ability to bring others into the game too. And I think he's a great option if something happens to Bundy Aki. Again, I'd love to see him getting game time, but looking at the guys who are there ahead of him, you might think that, well, if Bundy Aki goes down, then is it Henshaw and Ringrose at the starting pair, and then McCluskey is still excluded, and then it feels like it maybe needs 2 injuries for him to see game time, depending on what they want to do. Whether they want to give everyone game time, I'm not sure. Then we've got Jamie Osborne as well, who's had a fantastic season. And I thought, for me, in that semi-final, I would have left him in as a starter and said to Ringrose, listen, Gary, I know you're like a senior player, you're co-captain, etc. And, you've got so many Ireland caps, but you've just come back from injury, and we've been kind of, waiting on it for a long time now. You're starting on the bench. I think that would have been fair. I think Osborne earned his start in that one, and probably should have got it. And I think Ringrose would have had better impact off the bench as well. But Jamie is another one of those where you think, maybe he's in the squad just to be in the environment, and only really considered if there is some kind of injury crisis. But to so many centres, it's going to have to be some crisis, I think. But he's a guy that can definitely step up and do it if called upon. Finally, then onto the back three, we got James Lowe, certainly Leinster's best player in that defeat against the Bulls. Like, the guy really is a point of difference out in the wing there. You just have to get the ball to him, and he's got a better chance, I think, getting over the score than any of our other wide men. Calvin Nash, it's good to see him back in, because obviously, he was unavailable through injury earlier on in the season. So hopefully he's back to his best and he can kind of pick up where he left off, because he made a really impressive start to his Ireland career. Jimmy O'Brien then, kind of Swiss Army knife player that you can pop him in anywhere you need. And because of that, then I think for him, you're probably thinking that maybe it's going to be one of him or Frawley included into 23, unless there are, I think he's more likely to start, if there are injuries. But I think in terms of if people are fully fit, maybe Frawley, is on the bench, and maybe Lowe and Nash are the starting wings, and then, Jimmy O'Brien then potentially full back at that stage, because you look at the players who probably going to have their hands up for full back, and he's the more natural player to be in there. So either I think honestly it's between him and Frawley for 15, and then beyond that, then you think Frawley's, again, we talk about, he's probably going to be on the bench just because of the position he covers, and Jimmy O'Brien is probably going to start. I think if Keenan, who's another, obviously he's out because he's going to the Olympics with the sevens, but if he was in, I think Jimmy O'Brien would find it difficult to get into the matchday squad just because of Frawley's versatility as well. But with no Keenan there, he's probably going to start at full back, because you've got Jordan Larmour who could play there, and Jacob Stockdale could play there as well. But of the three, you probably think Jimmy O'Brien would be the more solid, the one you'd kind of trust a bit more, maybe to be fullback. But whoever it's going to be, they're absolutely going to get tested against South Africa, and why wouldn't they? And so Jimmy's going to have to bring his A game in terms of getting under those high balls, I think, in both tests. Then you got Jordan Larmour, who has definitely improved this season compared to last season. He seems to be playing more for the team than for himself, which is great to see. I would still like to see a little bit more greed in terms of getting over for tries, though, from him. I think that's something that Lowe and Nash have over him in terms of, for them, they love scoring tries, and I talked about it before, Jordan Larmour, he loves beating players. I'm convinced that Larmour would prefer to beat 2 extra players than just go and score a try. That's just how it feels, at least. Just his natural instinct on that. You can see he gets a high from that over scoring tries, but Lowe and Nash absolutely love getting in there and scoring. Jacob Stockdale then, he was included in the Ireland squad in the build up to the Six Nations. I thought that's kind of, I'm not sure about that, because at that stage he hadn't shown any form, and he was definitely a guy that was in there on the credit in the bank. But since then, his form has really come on. He's had a great end to the season, and he's definitely in there on merit, and that's great to see. Whether he's at the level now, he's definitely not at the level that he was when he broke through, when he was an absolute sensation on the wing. But whether he's at the level now that a conversation has to be had about him or Nash starting on the wing is another thing. And I think he's one who's going to have to show in those training sessions in the build up to the first test or between tests, that he is ready to, if called upon, to step up and do it. But that's the squad, and as I said, it's kind of a lot of it's just high level stuff that just have a chat about it. I'm again sure that there's plenty of things that I should have said and I didn't, and plenty of players who've missed out that I didn't mention and I should have done. But I'm relying on you guys to post them down in the comments. We can have a bit of discussion in the comments as well. I love doing that, interacting with you guys. And then potentially there's another video anyway to go maybe a little bit more depth in terms of talking more about anybody that you guys have brought up, and reasons why people are excluded. Obviously a lot of it is speculation, because they never come out and say this guy is out of the squad because of X or whatever, right? Other than injury or going to the Olympics. When it's like just a pure selection, maybe that guy has been told, but nobody else is going to get told. But that's our look at that. I'll have the preview of the URC final coming out tomorrow, and we're definitely going to have more kind of build up to the to the summer tests as well. Once we see more squads coming out, etc., we're going to be talking about those. So see you guys on the next one.